Hello, my friends. How are you? My name is Mr. Joseph. I present to you various real horror stories. Endless horror. If you are interested in horror stories, subscribe to the channel to receive everything new and tell us where you are from. Thank you. Let's begin.
My name is Ari Park. I am 31, Korean American, small enough that people mistake me for younger until they hear my voice and realize I carry a lot more night than my face shows. I live alone in a narrow second-floor walk-up over a nail, salon and a halal cart, the kind of apartment that smells like sesame oil and acetone depending on the hour dot. And I turn my bathroom into a dark room on the days I can't stand the light, black plastic trash bags taped over the glass block window, red safe light clamped to the towel bar, trays lined along the tub like lacquered ponds, the air sharp with developer and stop bath and fixer, the room humming gently with the fan that never quite clears the smell. I shoot weddings when I need money, storefront portraits when I'm desperate, and anything old when I want to feel like the world will forgive me for loving ghosts more than people. I found the camera at a flea market under the overpass where pigeons nest above the stalls and their coos echo like someone else's heartbeat. It was a Sunday, late summer, humid enough that shirt fabric sticks to your shoulder blades, and every breeze tastes like hot dust. I had a plastic cup of iced coffee sweating in my hand and a canvas tote under my arm. I had promised myself I wouldn't buy anything. And then I saw it on a table between a tin of war buttons and a chipped porcelain ballerina, a metal-bodied 35mm rangefinder, heavy, the leatherette cracking along the edges like dry lips. The seller was a man in his 70s with copper-brown skin and a flat cap, his knuckles swollen and shiny. He wore a pale yellow guayabera with the bottom button missing. He smelled faintly of clove cigarettes. He didn't say anything until I picked the camera up and pressed the shutter. It clicked clean, not dull, like it remembered work and wanted more. That one came with a surprise, he said, his voice a gravel road. Estate box from a storage unit. Lady said to get rid of her ex-husband's things. He never came back for them. Camera's got a roll inside. I didn't pull it. Some folks like the mystery. I turned it over. The back door was taped shut with old black gaffer that had gone gummy. The rewind knob had no give. The film was still loaded. I asked the price and he named a number that made me wince. Then he shrugged and named a number that made me pull cash. When he handed me the camera, he didn't let go right away. His fingers warm and dry, his eyes all white around the brown. People take pictures to remember or to prove something happened, he said. Sometimes the pictures remember more than the people do. I laughed too quickly because I didn't know what else to do. His mouth didn't lift. He just let go. Back home. I made ramen the way my mother taught me when she felt like forgiving me for leaving. Soft, boiled egg split and bleeding gold into the broth, a torn sheet of roasted seaweed, a mound of scallions, and I ate it standing at the window with the camera on the counter like a guest. The sun ran down the buildings. The neon sign in the nail salon flickered to life and sputtered. When I finished, I taped the bathroom window, shut the door, fixed the towels under the crack to choke the light, and turned on the red bulb. The world slipped into that warm Martian shade and I felt my chest loosen, the way it always does when the only voices are the ones in the chemicals. I peeled the old tape, rewound slowly, felt the film slither from sprocket to spool with that soft, ratcheting sound that is the closest thing I know to prayer. I cracked the back. The air sighed. The roll was a brand I hadn't shot since college, black and white. ISO stamped along the leader like a whisper from a dead machine. I loaded it into a stainless reel by touch, slid the reel into the steel tank, poured the developer, agitated 30 seconds, then 5 seconds each minute, my hand tapping out the rhythm on the tank lid. I thought about the man at the flea market, and about my father's old Minolta, and about all the weddings I had shot where the bride looked at me like her smile was a job. I poured the developer out, stopped bath in. The sting of vinegar clenched in the back of my throat, fixer in, the smell of pennies and rain on concrete. Then I washed until the water ran cold and clean. When I clicked the tank open and tugged the slick ribbon of film free, it was like lifting a shed skin from its snake. The negatives hung between my fingers, dripping tiny windows along the strip. I caught my breath the way I always do. For that first peek, the life inside the emulsion. The ghost I helped to show. At a glance, they were ordinary, A family at a park bench with swans skating across a green-gray pond. A woman in a kitchen holding a wooden spoon and laughing at someone, off frame. A paper party crown crooked on her head. A bus stop where two kids in school uniforms leaned their heads together and grinned. I clipped the strip to the hanger, clipped a weight to the bottom so it would dry straight dot, and stood very still while the film swayed. That's when I noticed them. Not in the center, not obvious dot, but there in the periphery. Faint figures standing behind the subjects dot under the trees at the park, between the fridge and the swinging kitchen door, by the bus shelter glass, blurred, as if the lens respected them just enough not to bring them into focus. I leaned closer, until my breath fogged the film. I lifted the loop to my eye, my heart quickened. I told myself it was double exposure or light leak or the seller's idea of a joke, but the blur wasn't a double of anyone in the frame, dot. The blur didn't share. The light the blur edged wrong, like a person standing in the seam between one moment and another, dot. The blur's head was tilted a little. Its hands hung too still, on the frame with the swans. The blurred figure stood on the bank where the grass should have broken around ankles, dot. But the blades ran right through as if through smoke. In the kitchen frame, the blurred figure wasn't quite tall enough for an adult and not quite awkward enough for a child, dot. The mouth was a smudge. The eyes were gray, blank ovals, yet when I stared, longer a pressure built in my chest as if someone realized I was looking. I told myself it was old film, maybe mold, an emulsion sickness that tricked the eye. I went to bed with my hair still smelling of Fixer. I fell asleep to the fan's purr and the nail salon's last sweep of broom, and I woke at 3:15 to the mechanical sound of a shutter, being cocked, soft, intimate as a breath in your ear. I lay cold under the sheet, staring into the little darkness of my apartment. Then I sat up and turned on my lamp, dot. The camera sat on the counter where I had left it. The metal threw off a dull coin shine. The shutter speed dial was set to 1/125th, dot. The focus ring had shifted. The window curtain moved in a draft. That wasn't there. I told myself an old spring can sing by itself. Metal has its own memory. I said it out loud in the kind of voice that wants to convince the furniture, dot. The second strip dried by afternoon. I brewed tea and sat at the kitchen, table with the negatives laid across my light box, the hum filling the room. I pressed the loop to my eye again. The frames moved through seasons. A haircut in a mirror, a winter street with bare trees flung against the white, a summer table with watermelon and a deck of cards in the later negatives. The faint figures weren't faint anymore, dot, still blurred. Faces smudged as if a thumb had pressed across their features while the emulsion was wet. But they were closer, dot. They stood right behind the subjects, a breath from their shoulders, and though their faces were blurred, their heads were turned to, dot. Their gray blankness was angled toward the lens. Toward me, I swallowed and called the flea market seller. I didn't think he would answer. He did. I ran the film, I said, my voice thinner than I meant. Do you know who the camera belonged to? He cleared his throat. I heard birds and cars and a radio somewhere behind him. Old storage unit off Essex, locker paid up for years. Woman finally sold it when her name changed. Said he left. Said she waited. That he loved the dark more than the day, that's what she said. Was he a photographer? I asked. He took pictures, the seller said. Most of us take pictures, some of us let the pictures take us, mija. The camera's you now. Careful what you ask it to remember. I thanked him because I didn't know how to ask him to. Take it back. I walked to the window. The nail salon's neon sign blinked. The halal cart's steam curled up. The street was ordinary, and everything in me felt like film before it meets light, unmade, taut humming. I decided to test the camera myself. I loaded a fresh roll with hands that didn't shake. I shot my houseplants, my chipped blue cereal bowl with its constellation of scratches, dot, the crooked picture of my mother in Busan in a white blouse with her hair in a low knot. Her expression the same one she wore whenever she told me I was too stubborn. I set the camera on the counter and walked across the room and pressed the timer and stood in my own doorway, arms crossed, chin lifted, dot. The little red light blinked and the shutter clapped curt, final. Then I went to the darkroom and made the room red again. When the new negatives came out of the tank, they looked like answers I didn't want. My plants were fine, my bowl was fine, my mother was fine, and she was beautiful. Dot. But in the frame of me, someone stood in the hallway behind my left shoulder, blurred and upright, head tilted like a question, the face an erasure. Dot. And if you stared long enough, you could tell that the gray blankness of the face wasn't evenly blank. Dot. It had the suggestion of an expression, as if someone had rubbed graphite haphazardly where a smile might be. Dot. The figure was closer than the ones on the found roll, close enough that the edge of my hair clipped into their shape and didn't disturb it at all. I set the loop down and it skittered across the glass with a little cry. My mouth went dry. The tea smelled like metal. Dot. My neighbor Tasha knocked then, her knuckles a bright peck. She is 27, African American. Tall and loose-limbed, her hair in thick twists piled like a crown. She wears silver hoops large enough to see a city through. Dot. She drops by when the hallway smells too much like somebody trying to cook without a mother. Dot. She walked in with a paper bag and said, "I brought beef patties, and yes, I will feed you because you look like a ghost forgot to take its sheet off." Then she saw my face and stopped. Her mouth softened. "Bad day?" she asked, and I nodded. Dot. She laid the bag on the counter, the grease already beginning to spot the paper. "Want to talk about it?" I didn't, but I did. I told her about the flea market, the film, the blurred people behind the people. I didn't show her the negatives because something in me felt like making her see would make the thing see her. She opened a patty and the meat steam rose and the pastry flaked across the counter. She chewed. She listened. She said, "So, your camera is hat, right?" "I tried," I said. "I put it in the back of the closet, and this morning it was on the kitchen table like it had always been there." I laughed, and it sounded like something coming out of a pipe. "I'm not sleeping great." She wiped crumbs from her lip with her pinky. "Then let me stay," she said. "You can sleep. I'll keep your ghosts entertained. I'll do bits, stand-up comedy for the dead." She grinned. Dot. But her eyes were careful. I wanted to cry because kindness is worse than fear sometimes. It makes the fear honest. Dot. That night she slept on the couch under my old quilt. I slept with my door open like a child and like a soldier. Dot. At 2:48, the little click of the camera's shutter woke me. My heart hammered so hard the seam under my ribs hurt. I slid from the bed and stepped into the hallway barefoot, the air cold on my skin. The camera sat at the end of the hall facing my bedroom, the lens capped. Dot. The strap curled around its own feet like a sleeping cat. I whispered no, and it sounded foolish and brave and wrong. I picked it up and put it on the highest shelf. Then I stood in the soft ticking silence and felt watched by something that had no eyes. In the morning I brewed coffee strong enough to walk on. Tasha blinked awake and stretched, her spine clicking. Dot. She smiled and then froze, her eyes fixed on the kitchen table. There, laid neatly on the wood, was a strip of wet negatives, beads of water glimmering along its edge. I hadn't developed anything yet. The strip was not one of mine. We stared without moving. You could smell fixer even in the light. I lifted the strip with 2 fingers and held it to the window. 3 frames, all of my hallway. The first empty, the second with me in the doorway, head turned as if toward a sound. The third with Tasha on the couch, eyes closed. Dot. And behind her, the blurred figure leaned close enough that its gray mouth brushed her hair. The face still erased. Yet turned directly toward the camera, toward us, toward the one holding the strip. I felt the world tilt a degree and lock again. Tasha whispered my name like the way you say a word when you're not sure it still means the same thing. We made rules then because rules are a way to make the dark shape itself. I would not be alone. At night I would not load the camera after sunset. I would keep the bathroom light red and the door closed if I worked. Tasha would keep the couch for a week, and we would take the camera back to the flea market man on Saturday because a bargain is still a bargain if you decide you bought the wrong thing. Before Saturday came, I went to see someone who loves chemicals more than I do. My old instructor, Ms. Winthrop, nearly 70, white, small, and straight-backed, hair cut short like a boy's in the 40s, eyes milky with a cataract that surgery refused. She lives above a frame shop that still smells like varnish and newspapers. She poured us hot water over stale tea bags and said, "Show me." with the kind of curiosity that makes scientists saints and fools. I laid the negatives on her light table, the white glow rising like a sterile pond. Her fingers are long, the nails square and unpainted. She leaned in. She breathed through her nose. She made a small sound in her mouth that meant she had found the edge of something she did not recognize. She said, "Not double exposure, not reticulation, not fungus. The blur cuts across the grain. It's in the picture, but not of the picture." Then she picked up the found roll strip and pointed to the edges where the manufacturer's stamp repeats, Kodak Safety Film 5000 and 6337, and between the numbers someone had scratched by hand. Faint, a habit little tick, dates, 1977, 1979, 1982, and lower, almost invisible. A series of letters, MB, 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 she said. Initials, maybe the photographer, maybe the lab tech. Maybe a kid learning to hate his hands. And then she said the thing I didn't want someone older and braver to say. The later frames. The blurred ones are looking at you, Ari. Whatever this is, it is attending. At the library, I pulled bound newspapers and fed spools of microfilm into a machine that moaned and coughed. I searched for a name with those initials in a storage unit, and a woman with a changed name. I found an article with a photograph that looked like it might not hate me, a man named Miles Beck, a photographer who had a studio once on Essex, black and white portraits in the paper, a house fire in 1983 that took a mother and a son and a dog, a bus accident that winter with 2 parish school children, a double exposure, in a feature about swans on the park pond that a columnist complimented as artful, his wife Margot, who left the state in 1984 after he disappeared. His last show titled Attend, a review that sneered at his affectation for blurred presences. I copied the article. The librarian smiled at me like she had seen this look before on other faces. I whispered thank you like a thief. Brought everything home and set it on the table, I said to the camera, which sat like a folded animal. Miles Beck. And my voice shook the way roads ripple under heat. Is this yours? And my apartment answered with the rumble of the bus outside and the nail salon's compressor coughing to life. Nothing else. But I felt a pressure in the air like the moment before you sneeze, something waiting to be acknowledged. That night, I dreamed of a dark room longer than a train car, trays like polluted lakes, a row of prints strung by clips, dripping, each print showing a face half erased. I walked along the line and wrote names on the white margins under each print. And with each name, the gray blur in the face softened into features. Eyes, mouth, someone's twins, someone's uncle, someone who liked birds, someone who lost their laugh. When I woke, the sun was at the ledge and the red bulb had burned itself cold. I sat up and knew what the story wanted. The story wanted names. The next 3 days, I did the job I wish someone had done for a person I once was. I made prints from the found negatives, 8x10s, glossy. I dodged and burned carefully until the people in the foreground looked proud of their small errands. I printed the blurred figures as well as a blur can be printed. I spent hours at the library looking up the Park Swans feature. The kitchen piece, where the woman was named as a local bake sale organizer. The bus stop near St. Bartholomew, SA. I found obituaries with the cadence of little bells. I found a fire report that listed a boy's name and his mother's maiden name. I bent over the light of the microfilm and whispered each name as if reading, then would keep them on the page. In pencil on the back of each print, I wrote the names I believed I had found. I wrote 4 before each name because I didn't know what else to give. I slid the prints into a clean archival box, my fingers black with silver and sorrow, and I carried it under my arm like a sleeping infant. Tasha drove because my hands shook. We went to the park and I placed the swan print under the willow at the bank where the blurred figure had stood. I said the names out loud. A woman pushing a stroller glanced at me and then away like she had walked into a chapel by mistake. At St. Bartholomew's, I left the bus stop print tucked into a votive rack and paid for 2 candles and lit both. The wax pooled quick and thick. In front of the burned-out row house on Essex, where only a brick cutout remained with soot-like eyeliner along the top. I leaned the kitchen print against the iron fence and slid a second one through the bars to rest on the charred sill. I said mother and son and dog. I said their names. I said I am sorry. which is the second prayer I learned in any language. That night I slept, not the way a cat sleeps ready to spring, but the way a body insists on leaving itself for a while. And when I woke, the apartment was still, the fan slow, the smell of chemicals faint but not cruel. I walked to the bathroom, the black plastic still taped across the window. I turned on the red safe light and stood in the glow until the pulse in my neck unclenched. The camera sat on the counter. I could feel it the way you feel another person in a small room. I lifted it and it was lighter. I don't know how that's possible, but weight lives in places that don't show. I loaded one last roll because I am greedy or because I needed a proof. I shot the hallway, the couch, the window. I set the timer and shot myself in the doorway. Again. I went through the motions like a rosary. Pour, tip, rinse, hang, wait. I breathed with the sink. The water ticked. The radiator clicked. I said the names again in my head in case someone had missed hearing their own. On the final frame, the hallway behind me was empty. No blurred person, no erased face, just the scuffed wood, the old runner, the little chip in the paint near the baseboard where a chair had kissed it too hard. On the frame after that, an accident, a light leak across half the image like a flare, beautiful and ruinous. And beyond it, I thought I could see some openness, a pewter-colored space like dawn over a river. But that might be my heart lying for me. The negatives dried, without any beads of fixer sweat. The air smelled sweet like water on steel. I took the camera to the flea market early, before the pigeons unrolled their wings from the rafters. The seller looked at me and then at the case in my hands, and he sighed, without moving his chest. Just that old man's sigh that knows too much. I set the camera on his table and slid the box of prints beside it and said, I think he wanted to return what he couldn't name. And the man nodded once, slow, like a priest taking confession. He touched the camera down with 2 fingers as if it were a brow he was blessing. Things come back, he said, but they drag their water with them. I walked home with my hands in my pockets, light as I have ever been and still carrying more than I brought. Tasha called from the bodega and told me she was buying plums. Her laugh came quick and true, and I wanted to keep it. In my bathroom, the red bulb hung cold. The black plastic glowed faint with day. The trays were empty and clean. I put a kettle on the stove and watched its first breath show. Later, I framed one print for myself. Not from the found roll, but from my last. The one of the hallway with no one in it. I hung it where I could see it from my bed, and when the night laid itself along the floorboards, and the city made its tired music. There were no little clicks from the counter, no wet strip laid out like a threat, just water plumbing where it must. Wind threading itself around things, and sleep coming over me like a dark cloth over a lens, soft, sure, kind. Sometimes I still shoot in the bathroom with the window taped and the light red, and the water runs like slow silver. And when I lift a strip from the reel, I hear my instructor's hands in my head counting time. I hear my mother telling me to eat before thinking. I hear Tasha in the other room pretending not to listen. Sometimes, if I stand very still, I swear I hear a low chorus too. Not whispers exactly. More like the sound of pages turned in a church where nobody is reading. A gentle, dry music. And I think, good. Let them attend to one another, let the pictures keep them, let the names live where the light can find them. And when I switch off the red bulb, the room blackens clean, like a pond that keeps its surface smooth. And the door, behind me, shuts with a soft click that sounds only like a door closing. Not like a shutter, not like a warning, just like a house tucking itself in around a person who is not afraid to sleep anymore.